As golfers these days, we are surrounded by a seemingly infinite amount of data, whether that's the launch monitor that you're using when you practice, giving you club and ball data, or whether it's training aids such as the HackMotion wrist sensor, giving us data on exactly what's going on at the wrist level. But what would be really useful would be a way to interpret that data. How could we use that to our benefit and help us to become better golfers? Well, today, this video is going to deal with that exact subject. We're going to talk about one very specific metric that TrackMan will measure and how you can combine what you're doing with your wrists and the TrackMan data to help you be a better ball striker immediately. And the data point that we're going to discuss, which has a very strong correlation to handicap, is low point distance. That's discussing where the bottom of the swing is. I can use this plastic hoop here to help illustrate what low point is. If we were to take this and use it as a reference for the bottom of the swing, being, let's say, a circular shape, we've got the golf club swinging on this circle. If the low point of the swing was 0 centimeters or 0 inches before or after the ball, meaning the low point of this circle was directly at the ball, TrackMan would measure that as 0.0 inches after or before the ball, 0.0. Better golfers have the low point of the swing after the ball when hitting the ball from the ground. Essentially, every single club that you hit from the ground needs to have the low point after the golf ball. That creates this slightly descending blow that we need when we're hitting the ball from the ground. And for a mid-iron like this, the amount would be around 4 inches after the ball. And there is a very strong correlation between your handicap and your ability to consistently put the low point of your swing after the ball. The best golfers have it the furthest forwards and they have the tightest dispersion, meaning they're able to put it in the same place time after time after time. Conversely, the highest handicap golfers have the low point the furthest back. Some golfers even have it behind the golf ball, which I think you can probably appreciate is going to be a problem. That causes you to hit the ground before the ball, fat shots, and it also causes the golfer to start to flip and cast their wrists so that the club head overtakes the hands, and then the golfer starts to thin and top the ball. Having the low point of the swing before the ball is a worldwide epidemic that defines poor golf. So where you put the bottom of this circle matters tremendously. The further forward it is, the better golfer you will be. Quick question for you. Did you know that 80% of your golf ball's direction comes from the club face angle at impact? And it's your wrists that control that angle. If you want to hit straighter shots and add more distance to your game, then check out the link in the description below. So with such a strong correlation between the location of the low point and a golfer's skill, their handicap effectively, it would stand to reason that you'd want to practice in a way that helped you to put the low point of your swing further forward. You'll see on that one that was 2 inches after the ball. And if that was desirable for you and it was something you were trying to do, low point distance being a key metric, let's remember, in how good or bad a golfer you are, then it stands to reason we'd want to know what causes the low point to move around, what are the factors in the swing that we need to pay attention to that influence the low point distance the most. There's two main factors that you need to pay attention to. Number one, the location of your weight from a left to right perspective. Meaning if I wanted the low point of my swing to be behind the ball, the furthest back, I would hit the ball with my weight on my back foot. You'll notice there when TrackMan picks that up, it didn't quite grab that one. Let me do that again. If I hit the ball off my back foot, like so, the low point of my swing is going to be behind the ball. I did that so excessively there, it doesn't want to pick up the data. But the location of the low point here is influenced by where my weight is. Keep my weight on my back foot, hit the ball, 2.3 inches behind the ball. That was a very thin contact. Didn't feel very solid at all. I can tell just from those 3 attempts that I made there to hit the ball from my back foot that every single one of the contacts there felt poor. So even though on the screen that shot might look okay, it's not something you'd want to be trying to do consistently because it's very hard to repeat. You're going to find outside in particular when you're actually hitting from the ground, hitting from the grass, Having a low point before the ball is very detrimental to your ball striking. As I say, fat shots, thin shots, top shots, all sorts of problems. In fact, it's one of the things that sometimes gets masked by practicing from indoor facility or from a driving range mat, is hitting from an artificial surface like this slightly skews what your contact is like, because having your low point a little bit before the ball on a mat is not as penalizing as it is as having that same low point back and behind the ball from the grass. So we certainly don't want that. The first thing I said there was that the weight, the location of your weight to the left or the right, will play a part in where the low point is. So that would also stand to reason that if I wanted my low point to be further forward, I could make sure that my weight was towards the target when I hit the ball, and I'm going to have a much greater chance of getting the low point to be after the ball. You'll see there almost 6 inches towards the target. Certainly felt like a nicer contact as well. But the location of your weight isn't the only factor that we want to consider. We need to also understand how the wrists control the radius of the swing. So for many golfers who have the low point back, they'll be casting and releasing their wrist angles prematurely. That would look something like this. If I hit this shot here, let the wrist angles come out prematurely so that when I make contact, the club head has already overtaken my lead arm. We're going to get some data there on the HackMotion, which is going to tell a very telling story which may be familiar to too many of you. First of all, the low point there was 2 inches before the ball. No good. I didn't have my weight back. I had my weight in a good place, but what I did was release my wrist prematurely. How do I know that? Because I can look at the address number on my HackMotion lead wrist sensor there. 17 degrees of extension, very consistent with a neutral grip like mine, a small amount of extension. But at the point of impact, I had exactly the same amount of extension. That's not going to work. You do not want to have the club back in that same position when you hit the ball. What we're looking for to keep the low point forward is to have more lead wrist flexion at the point of impact to help produce this desirable shaft lean, which helps us to hit down for longer and gets the low point after the ball. So, 2 things to think about when you want to get the low point more forward. Have the weight on the front side, the lead leg when you hit the ball. That's the hip sway or the weight shift that you'd be familiar with in good golf swings. And secondly, have the lead wrist flatter, more flexed when you hit the ball versus when you started. More flexed when you hit the ball versus when you started. Let me exaggerate one of those. So we're going to swing back, weight on the front, flexed lead wrist at impact. It's just a very small chip-in example to show you how that gets the low point nearly 7 inches after the ball. And you'll see on the data there that my lead wrist went from 23 degrees of extension at setup, again, consistent with a fairly neutral grip, to 9 degrees of flexion at the point of impact. That's 23 plus 9, 32 degrees of change in that lead wrist. Now, that's easier to do when the swing's slow. I encourage you guys who are trying this to start out slowly. You'll see how the wrist motion is the harder part of this equation to control. Keeping the weight on the front, not too difficult. The wrist feel needs to be that lead wrist stays flat into the follow through for as long as possible. This is how I would start building it up, and you'll see how the low point stays very forward. The flexion in the lead wrist is continuing to increase. These would be things consistent with good ball strikers, and once you've practiced that for a while, you'd want to see that the low point was consistently after the ball, and you can begin to swing a little bit faster, keeping the low point after the ball via the weight being forward and the lead wrist being flatter, 3.2 inches after the ball. Keep hitting with the weight forward and the wrist flat at impact. Once you start to hit balls like that, you'll start to get a sense of a very consistent type of contact. They're very solid and very well compressed shots there, with the low point existing around 4 inches after the ball on all of those shots. So not only is the low point consistently after the ball, it's also quite tight in terms of its dispersion. It's not 1 inch after the ball on one swing and then 7 or 8 inches after the ball on the next swing and then back to 1 inch on the next one. The dispersion, the tightness of that low point location is also a key indicator in terms of your skill. So next time you're practicing with TrackMan, pull up the low point distance metric. That's the one you should be focused on. Have a look at what your data looks like to begin with. First of all, it should be after the ball with all clubs, with maybe the exception of the driver. Every other club, you want that low point to be after the ball. Somewhere between 2 to 5 inches would be a good number. The longer the club, fairway woods and hybrids, that low point is going to be slightly less after the ball. And then for the shorter irons, you're going to get up towards that 4, 5, maybe 6 inches after the golf ball. But remember, always after. If you want a ballpark figure to aim for, look for 4 inches after the ball and try to be as consistent as you can with that number. So the key takeaway there is there are 2 factors that control the low point location. The weight at impact, where your body weight is positioned relative to your feet, left and right, forward and back. And number 2, how much lead wrist flexion versus extension you have, which controls the radius of the swing with the club shaft either being forward, leaning forward like we need it to be, or whether it's already overtaken that lead wrist, which would be where the problems start to occur. I promise you this metric is one of the most closely aligned to handicap. So the further forward you can get your low point and the more consistently you can deliver that club after the ball, the low point of the swing after the ball, the better golfer you will become. Therefore, it makes sense to focus on this metric when you practice. I hope you found the video useful and informative. You've now got 2 things to consider when thinking about low point distance, and you can use your HackMotion wrist sensor to help you train your wrist angles to promote a low point that is after the golf ball. If you're interested in learning more about HackMotion and other wrist training videos, there's going to be a link in the description of this video that you can click. And if you'd like more videos about how to integrate launch monitor practice with your HackMotion, get down in the comments and let me know.